Your intelligence is being murdered right now, not by lack of talent, by the way you were taught to think. They told you learning means memorizing. That understanding means repeating back what the teacher said. That being smart means having the right answer quickly. Every single part of that is backward. I've watched genuinely brilliant minds destroy themselves trying to think correctly. Meanwhile, the actual breakthrough moments of my life, the ones that changed physics, came from thinking incorrectly on purpose, from breaking the rules of thought itself. What if I told you that confusion isn't the opposite of understanding? It's the raw material. Look, I need you to understand something right from the start here. Most advice about thinking smarter is actually advice about thinking faster, cleaner, more efficiently, like your brain is a machine that needs optimization. Buy this course, use this app, follow this method, memorize these flashcards, and maybe some of that stuff works for passing tests, I don't know. But that's the trap, you see? That's the thing that's been killing you this whole time, and you didn't even know it. The reason you feel stuck, the reason you watch videos like this one hoping someone will finally give you the secret, isn't because your mind is slow or broken or inferior. It's because you've been taught to hate the very state where real thinking happens. Confusion, mess, contradiction, not knowing. Every time you feel that sensation of, I don't get this, you've been trained to panic, to feel stupid, to assume something's wrong with you. And so you do what everyone does. You look for the answer. You ask the expert. You Google it. You find someone who'll just tell you what to think so you can stop feeling that horrible sensation of being lost. And every single time you do that, you strangle the exact part of your brain that could actually change everything. See, this video isn't going to give you a shortcut. I'm not going to teach you how to memorize better or read faster or hack your productivity. What I'm going to do is much more dangerous than that. I'm going to dismantle the lie that intelligence is about having answers. I'm going to show you how the greatest minds in history, including mine, and I don't say that to brag, I say it because it's just true, didn't transcend confusion. We weaponized it. We fell in love with it. We built our entire lives around staying inside it longer than any sane person would. And here's what nobody tells you. Your instinct to understand quickly is killing your understanding. The fact that you want the answer right now, that you feel anxious when you don't know, that you'd rather have someone explain it to you than figure it out yourself, that's not a character flaw. That's conditioning. That's what school did to you, what your parents did to you, what this whole society does to everyone. They taught you that being smart means having the right answer when called upon. But actually being smart, that means being comfortable not having any answer at all. It means sitting in the question like it's a warm bath. It means investigating reality like a curious child who doesn't care about looking stupid because they haven't learned shame yet. And here's the reframe that changes everything. You don't need a better brain. You don't need to be born different. You need permission to use the one you have the way it actually works, through play, through failure, through shameless curiosity that doesn't care about looking smart. That's not inspiration. That's the method. That's the whole thing. So let me tell you some stories. Because I don't learn from abstract principles, and neither do you. We learn from watching what actually happens when someone tries something. And I want you to see what happens when you stop trying to think like you're supposed to and start thinking like you actually do. I'm going to take you back to Cornell. This is right after the war, after Los Alamos, after we built the bomb. And I'm in a really dark place, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, I'd just watched us create something that incinerated 2 cities. People I knew, people I worked with, we'd done this thing. And I came back to teach at Cornell, and I couldn't think. I couldn't work. Every time I sat down to do physics, it felt hollow. Like, what's the point? What's any of this for? We're just going to use it to kill more people, right? That was the loop in my head. So I'm walking through the cafeteria one day, and I see this student goofing around. He's got a plate, one of those cafeteria plates with the Cornell medallion on it, and he throws it up in the air, just messing around. And I'm watching this plate spin, and I notice something weird. The plate is wobbling, like a frisbee when you throw it wrong, but the medallion, the little Cornell logo stamped on the plate, it's spinning at a different rate than the wobble. The wobble's going one speed, the spin's going another speed, and they don't match up. And I'm standing there with my tray, and I'm thinking, that's strange. Why does it do that? What's the relationship between the wobble and the spin? Now here's the thing. At this moment, I have no reason to care about this. None. This is not a research question. This is not connected to anything important. This is a cafeteria plate. This is a kid goofing off. There is no grant money for studying wobbling plates. There's no Nobel Prize for cafeteria physics. It is, by every measure that academia cares about, completely useless. And that's exactly why it saved me. Because I didn't care if it was useful. I didn't care if it mattered. I just wanted to know. I was curious. For the first time in months, I felt that little spark of, wait, what's actually happening here? And so I went back to my office, and I worked it out. I set up the equations. I figured out the relationship between the wobble rate and the spin rate. And it turned out, and this is the beautiful part, the wobble was twice as fast as the spin. There was this perfect mathematical relationship hiding in this stupid plate. And I felt joy. Real joy. For the first time since the war, I felt like myself again. Not because I'd solved some important problem, because I'd played. I'd followed my curiosity to somewhere it wanted to go, with no agenda, no pressure, no need for it to be useful. I showed the equations to my colleague, Hans Bethe. Brilliant guy. And he looked at them and said, "Okay, that's cute, Richard, but what's it good for? What's the application?" And I told him, I said, "Hans, it's not good for anything. It doesn't matter. I'm just playing. And here's the part that changed physics. That little wobbling plate? That useless curiosity? It contained the mathematics that I would later use to completely reformulate quantum electrodynamics. The work that won me the Nobel Prize started with me watching a plate wobble in a cafeteria because I had nothing better to do. You see what happened there? When I removed the pressure to be useful, when I stopped trying to do important work, when I just followed the curiosity like a dog following a scent, that's when my mind became actually useful. That's when the real thinking happened. Most people have this exactly backward. They think you need discipline. You need to focus on what matters. You need to ignore distractions and work on the serious stuff. And maybe that works for some things, I don't know. But for thinking, for actually understanding something new, that pressure kills you. It killed me. It wasn't until I gave myself permission to be useless that I could be useful again. So why does pressure kill thinking? That's the question nobody explains. Why can't you just decide to think hard about something and have it work? Why does trying harder make you dumber? I figured this out years later, in a completely different situation. I'm in Brazil, and I meet this guy who sells abacuses. You know those wooden frames with the beads you slide back and forth? The Japanese abacus, the soroban, it's called. And this guy is fast. I mean really fast. I give him multiplication problems, big ones, multiple digits, and his fingers are just flying across this thing. He's beating people with mechanical calculators. It's genuinely impressive. So I'm watching him, and I get curious. I want to know how his mind works. And I notice something. When he's calculating, he's completely silent, totally focused, fingers moving but no talking. So I decide to test something. I give him a problem, and while he's working on it, I ask him a question. Just a simple question like, "Hey, what's your name? Where are you from?" And he stops. Can't do both. Can't calculate and talk at the same time. The abacus work requires his full attention. He has to stop talking to do the math. But here's the interesting part. I can do math in my head and talk at the same time. No problem. I can be working out a calculus problem and have a conversation, and neither one interferes with the other. Why? What's the difference? It took me a while to figure out, but here's what's happening. He's using a different part of his brain than I am. He's visualizing the abacus. He's seeing the beads move in his mind. That's a visual process. And talking is also visual in a weird way. You're picturing the words, the concepts, the thing you're describing. So when he tries to do both, they compete. They're both trying to use the same mental machinery. But I don't calculate visually. I calculate with this internal sense of the numbers themselves, this almost tactile feeling of the relationships. I can't even describe it properly. It's not words, it's not pictures, it's this other thing. And because it's in a different part of my brain, I can talk at the same time. No interference. And this is when I realized there's no one way to think. Your brain is weirder and more personal than any system anyone could teach you. The way I do math isn't the way he does math. Neither one is wrong. Neither one is right. They're just different. And the tragedy is that school teaches you there's one correct way to understand something. Everyone's brain works the same. If you can't learn the way the teacher explains it, something's wrong with you. But that's insane. That's like saying there's one correct way to walk, one correct way to laugh, one correct way to see color. Your brain has its own weird architecture, its own patterns and rhythms and textures. And when you try to force it to work like someone else's brain, you're not just inefficient, you're doing violence to your own mind. So stop trying to think correctly. Stop looking for the one right method. Find how you actually think. Pay attention to what your brain does naturally when you're not trying to force it. Some people think in pictures, some people think in words, some people think in sensations, in movements, in sounds, in patterns that don't have names yet. And the only way to find out how you think is to stop judging it and start noticing it. Let me give you a metaphor, because I think in metaphors sometimes, and maybe you do too. Imagine understanding is like a locked box. You want to know what's inside. Most people immediately start looking for the key. They ask, who has the key? What's the answer? What's the formula? What did the expert say? Where's the textbook that'll tell me? They're searching for the key, and they won't touch the box until they find it. But here's what genius does. Genius says, forget the key. Let me just look at this box. What's it made of? How's it put together? What happens if I shake it? Can I hear something inside? What if I peek through the keyhole? What if I try to pry it open? What if I break it? What if I build my own box and see how that works, and then come back to this one? The box doesn't care about your method. It doesn't care if you look stupid. It doesn't care if you're doing it the right way. It just cares if you're actually investigating, if you're actually looking. And most people never look. They just wait for someone to hand them the key, and they call that learning. But you don't learn by being handed keys. You learn by investigating boxes, by being clumsy and weird and destructive in your curiosity, by trying things that don't work, by making messes, by following hunches that lead nowhere. That's not wasting time. That's the actual process. That's what thinking looks like when it's really happening. Now let me teach you something practical, something you can actually use. I'm going to give you 5 principles, and I want you to understand that these aren't rules. They're more like observations, things I noticed about how understanding actually builds, as opposed to how we pretend it builds. First principle, and this is the one that changes everything. Fall in love with, I don't know. There are 2 kinds of not knowing, and most people only experience one of them. There's paralyzing not knowing. That's the I don't know. Therefore, I can't proceed. I need to find someone who knows. I need to learn the prerequisite. I need to go back and study more. I'm not ready yet. That's the kind of not knowing that stops you. But there's another kind. Activating not knowing. That's the, I don't know, what can I discover right now with what I have? What can I figure out by just looking? What happens if I try this? What if I'm wrong about this assumption? That's the kind of not knowing that starts you. And here's what nobody tells you. Most education, most schooling, most traditional learning trains you in the first kind. It teaches you to be afraid of not knowing, to see it as a problem that needs to be solved before you can begin. You don't know calculus? Go learn algebra first. You don't understand quantum mechanics? Go study classical mechanics. You're not ready. You don't have the prerequisites. Come back when you know more. But every breakthrough I ever had, every single one, came from the second kind of not knowing, from starting before I was ready, from diving into something I didn't understand and seeing what I could figure out, from treating my ignorance not as a barrier but as a starting point. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice. When I was working on quantum electrodynamics, I didn't understand it. I really didn't understand it. The theory that existed at the time, the one everyone else was using, it was giving infinite answers to simple questions, infinities everywhere. And people were doing these complicated mathematical tricks to make the infinities cancel out, and it worked, sort of. But nobody really understood why. It was a mess. And I could have done what most people do. I could have said, well, I don't understand this, so I need to study harder. I need to read more papers. I need to learn what the experts know. I need to master this framework before I can do anything new with it. But instead I said, I don't understand this. And maybe that's because this framework is wrong. What if I just start over? What if I throw out everything I've been taught and just ask, what's actually happening when an electron moves? What's the simplest way to describe that? Forget the fancy math. Forget the formalism. What's really going on? And that's where the Feynman diagrams came from me admitting I didn't understand the existing theory and deciding that was permission to build a new one. From treating my confusion not as something to overcome, but as information, as a signal that maybe there's a simpler way to look at this. See, your brain can't learn if it's pretending to already know. If you're nodding along in class, copying down notes, acting like you understand, your brain thinks the job is done. There's no gap to fill. There's no problem to solve. But when you admit you're confused, when you really own it, your brain goes into a different mode. It starts investigating. It starts building. It stops receiving and starts creating. And that's the shift I want you to make. Stop seeing, I don't know, as something shameful. Start seeing it as something powerful, as the beginning of actual understanding instead of the proof that you don't have it yet. You're not behind. You're finally starting correctly. Second principle, and this one, people always think they understand it before they actually do. Explain it to a child. You've probably heard this before. The Feynman technique, they call it now, which is funny because I never thought of it as a technique. I just thought of it as checking whether I actually understood something. But here's how it works, and more importantly, here's why it works. Pick any concept, anything you think you understand, could be something from physics, could be something from your job, could be how a bill becomes a law, could be how your microwave works. Anything, and now explain it out loud like you're talking to an 8-year-old. Someone who's smart and curious but doesn't have any technical background. No jargon, no fancy words, just plain language. And watch what happens. Watch where you get stuck. Watch where you start using big words because you don't actually know what they mean. Watch where you wave your hands and say, basically, or essentially, or it's kind of like. Every time you do that, you've found a gap, a place where your understanding is fake, where you've memorized words without comprehending ideas. And this is the most important part. That's not a failure. That's a diagnosis. You've just discovered exactly where you need to go deeper. Most people never find these gaps because they never test themselves like this. They read something, they think they get it, they move on. And they're just building this house of cards, this fake understanding made of memorized phrases and half-grasped concepts. But when you try to explain it simply, the cards fall down. And that's good. That's the whole point. You want them to fall down in private, when you're alone, so you can rebuild them properly. You don't want to discover the gaps when you're trying to use the knowledge for something real. Let me tell you why this works, neurologically. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I've thought about this a lot. When you read something, When you listen to a lecture, you're receiving information in someone else's structure. The teacher or the textbook has organized the ideas in a particular way, and you're just absorbing that organization. You're downloading it like a file. But understanding isn't downloading. Understanding is building. It's taking these raw materials, these facts and observations and claims, and constructing something in your mind. A model, a structure, something you made. And the only way to know if your structure is solid is to use it, to walk around on it, to explain it to someone else, which forces you to traverse every beam and joint. When you explain something simply, you're not dumbing it down. You're checking your own construction. You're making sure every piece connects, that you can get from here to there using only the structure you've built, without any magic jumps or hidden assumptions. And here's what's beautiful. Every time you do this, every time you rebuild your understanding in your own words, it gets stronger. It becomes yours in a way it never was when you just read it. You're not carrying around someone else's ideas anymore. You've built your own version. And that version might be different from the textbook's version, might be simpler in some ways, more complicated in others. But it's yours. You made it. You can modify it, extend it, apply it in new ways because you understand how it's built. I learned this from teaching. Every time I had to explain something to a student, I understood it better afterward. Not because I was so smart, but because teaching forced me to build the concept from scratch, to find the path from their understanding to the new idea. And every time I did that, I found new paths, new ways of seeing it, new connections I hadn't noticed before. So this isn't just about checking your understanding. It's about building understanding in the first place. Teaching makes you smarter than studying. Explaining makes you understand better than absorbing. And if you can explain it to a child, you really know it. If you can't, you don't. It's that simple. Third principle. And this is the one most people resist because it feels wrong. Play with the damn thing. Knowledge without play is dead information. It's inert. It just sits there in your brain like a book on a shelf that never gets opened. You might be able to recall it if someone asks the right question, but you can't use it. You can't apply it. You can't see where it connects to other things. It's dead. Let me tell you how I learned quantum mechanics. Not the first time when I was a student. I'm talking about when I really learned it. I was already at MIT, already supposed to be an expert, and I realized I didn't really understand the math everyone was using. The formalism, the notation, it all felt like magic tricks. People would write these symbols and do these operations and get the right answer, but I couldn't see why. I couldn't see what was really happening. So I invented my own notation. I made up my own way of writing the equations based on what made sense to me, and I worked through all the standard problems using my notation instead of the textbooks. And you know what happened? I got the wrong answers at first. My notation was broken. It didn't work for certain cases, and that was perfect, because now I could see why. I could see what assumptions were built into the standard notation that I'd missed. I could see what the math was actually doing. And by the time I was done, by the time I'd played with it enough to make my own notation work, I understood quantum mechanics at a level I never could have reached by just studying the textbook. Because I hadn't just learned it. I'd rebuilt it. I'd taken it apart and put it back together. I'd broken it and fixed it. I'd played with it. This is the difference between studying a guitar and playing a guitar. You can read books about music theory, you can memorize chord shapes, you can watch videos of other people playing, but until you actually put your hands on the strings and make sounds, bad sounds, wrong sounds, weird sounds, you're not really learning guitar. You're learning about guitar. And the same is true for everything. Physics, cooking, programming, writing, understanding people, understanding yourself. You don't learn it by studying it. You learn it by playing with it, by manipulating it, by trying things and seeing what happens, by breaking it on purpose to see where it breaks, by remixing it, misusing it, testing its boundaries. But here's where people get stuck. They're afraid to play because they might learn it wrong. They think there's a right way and a wrong way, and if they mess around too much, they'll build bad habits or develop misconceptions that'll be hard to correct later. And yeah, okay, that can happen. But you know what? It's better to learn it wrong and know where you're confused than to learn it right and understand nothing. Because here's the secret. When you play with something and get it wrong, you develop intuitions. You build this tactile sense of how it behaves, what it does, where it breaks down. And even if your intuitions are wrong, they're yours. You can test them. You can refine them. You can notice when they fail and adjust. But when you just absorb the right way from a textbook or a teacher, you don't have intuitions. You have rules. And rules are brittle. They work exactly when they're supposed to and fail catastrophically everywhere else. Intuitions are flexible, they grow, they adapt, and they come from play, not from study. So whatever you're trying to learn right now, find a way to play with it. If it's a skill, practice it badly. Make mistakes on purpose. Try the wrong technique just to see what happens. If it's a concept, apply it somewhere weird. Test it in cases where it shouldn't work. Break the rules. Mix it with other concepts and see what explodes. If it's a system, push it. Overload it. Starve it. See what it does under stress. Your urge to mess around isn't distraction. It's not procrastination. It's not you being irresponsible. It's how your brain actually integrates information. It's how you turn dead knowledge into living understanding. And anyone who tells you to stop playing and get serious doesn't understand how learning actually works. Fourth principle, doubt the experts, including me. My father taught me this. He wasn't a scientist. He sold uniforms. But he understood something about knowledge that most educated people don't. We'd go walking in the woods, and he'd point at a bird, and he'd say, "You see that bird?" In Italian it's called this. In Chinese it's called that. In English it's called something else. Now, do you know anything more about the bird? And I'd say, no, just what it's called in different languages. And he'd say, exactly, the name doesn't matter, watch what it does, that's what matters. He taught me to distinguish between knowing the name of something and knowing the thing itself, between authority and understanding, between what people say and what's actually happening. And that's been the foundation of everything I've done. Because here's what happens when you trust experts too much. You stop looking. You stop investigating. Someone tells you how something works, and you just accept it. You don't check. You don't test it. You don't ask yourself, wait, does that actually make sense? You just store it away like it's truth, like it's gospel, because an expert said it. And sometimes the expert is right. A lot of times, even. Experts usually know what they're talking about. But not always. And more importantly, even when they're right, they don't know the thing the way you need to know it. They know it their way, in their words, through their understanding. And if you want to really know it, you need to build your own version. You need to investigate it yourself. So here's how to listen to experts. Take their claims as starting points for your own investigation, not endpoints. Someone tells you how something works? Great. Now go look at it yourself. Test it. See if you can see what they're talking about. See if it makes sense when you examine it directly. Don't just accept it because they said it. Even if they're smarter than you. Even if they have credentials. Even if they wrote the textbook. And this is especially important when the expert is certain. When they tell you this is definitely true, this is settled science, everyone knows this, there's no debate. That's when you should be most skeptical. Not because they're necessarily wrong, but because certainty is a red flag. Real understanding comes with nuance, with caveats, with awareness of what you don't know. When someone has no doubt, they've either discovered absolute truth, which is rare, or they've stopped investigating. And if they've stopped investigating, why should you trust them? Every expert is wrong about something. Every theory has limits. Every explanation breaks down somewhere. And your job isn't to find the perfect teacher, the perfect book, the perfect source of truth. Your job is to develop the skill of noticing when anyone, including you, including me, is full of shit. And you develop that skill by checking, by looking at the thing itself, not just the description of the thing, by asking, does this actually make sense? Does this match what I can observe? Does this explain what I'm seeing? Or am I forcing what I'm seeing to match the explanation? I'll tell you something that happened at Los Alamos. We're building the atomic bomb, right? Everything's classified, everything's compartmentalized, and there are all these military guys, officers, experts in security telling us what we can and can't do, and one of them tells me, "You can't take documents out of this building. Too dangerous. Someone might steal the secrets." And I'm thinking, okay, but wait. I go home every night with all these secrets in my head. The documents are just paper. The actual secrets are in my brain. If someone wanted to steal them, they'd kidnap me, not steal papers from a locked building. So what exactly is this rule protecting? And he doesn't have a good answer. Because he hasn't actually thought about it. He's just following procedure. He's an expert in security theater, not in actual security. And this happens everywhere. People follow rules, repeat claims, enforce procedures, without ever checking if they make sense. Without ever asking, wait, what are we actually trying to accomplish here? So yes, respect expertise. Learn from people who know more than you. Stand on the shoulders of giants, all that. But distrust certainty. Question assumptions. Check for yourself. And never ever let someone else's confidence override your own observation of reality. Fifth principle, and this one's going to feel like permission, which it is. Embrace the mess. Real thinking doesn't move in straight lines. It doesn't go from A to B to C in a neat, logical progression. That's how we write it down after we figure it out, to make it look clean and professional. But that's not how it actually happens. Real thinking spirals. It backtracks. It hits dead ends. You think you understand something, then you realize you don't. Then you understand it differently. Then you realize that new understanding contradicts something else you thought you knew, so you have to go back and rethink that. And maybe now the first thing makes sense again, but in a completely different way. This is normal. This is what thinking looks like. But we've built this cultural lie that smart people think clearly from A to B to C. That if you're really intelligent, your thoughts are organized, linear, logical. You start with premises and arrive at conclusions through valid inferences. Clean, clear, efficient. But that's not how anyone actually thinks. That's how we present our thinking after we've done it. After we've already figured it out through a messy, non-linear process, we clean it up, we organize it, we write it in a way that makes it look like we knew where we were going the whole time. But we didn't. Nobody does. Einstein didn't wake up one morning and think, okay, here's special relativity, step 1 through 10, perfectly logical. He spent years confused, years playing with different ideas, years going down wrong paths and having to backtrack, years not knowing what he was doing. And only after he figured it out could he write it in a way that looks clean. Same with every scientist, every mathematician, every thinker who's ever contributed anything real. The published paper, the textbook explanation, the lecture, that's the cleaned up version. That's the final draft. The actual process was a mess. But we don't show people the mess. We only show them the final version. And so everyone thinks they're supposed to think like the final version, clean and organized and linear. And when their actual thinking is messy and chaotic and full of false starts, they think something's wrong with them. They think they're scatterbrained, disorganized, not smart enough. But you're not scatterbrained. You're thinking in the actual shape of thought. You're doing it right. You just need to stop trying to organize your way to understanding. Let me tell you what this looks like practically. When I'm working on a problem, my notebooks are a disaster. Half-finished thoughts, equations that go nowhere, diagrams that don't make sense even to me a week later, crossed-out ideas, arrows pointing to other pages, notes in the margins that say, wait, this is wrong, or check this later, Or just a question mark? If you looked at my notebooks, you would not think, "This is a brilliant mind at work." You would think, "This person is confused and possibly having a breakdown." But that's the process. That's what it looks like when you're actually thinking, not when you're pretending to have already thought. The mess is the thinking. The dead ends are the thinking. The contradictions are the thinking. You're exploring a space you don't understand yet, and exploration is messy. It has to be. So give yourself permission for messy notebooks, for half-thoughts, for ideas that contradict each other, for starting something, realizing it's wrong, and starting over. For thinking you understand, then realizing you don't, then understanding differently. That's not failure. That's progress. And stop trying to organize everything before you understand it. Stop making neat outlines and tidy summaries and color-coded notes. Not because those things are bad, they're great for reviewing things you already understand, but they're terrible for developing understanding in the first place, because they impose a structure before you've discovered the structure. They make it look like you know where you're going before you know where you're going. Understanding is not about organization, it's about discovery. And discovery is messy. Always has been, always will be. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can stop wasting energy trying to look smart and start actually becoming smart. Okay, so those are the 5 principles. Fall in love with "I don't know." Explain it to a child. Play with the damn thing. Doubt the experts. Embrace the mess. Now let me give you some actual practices, things you can do tonight, tomorrow, this week, to start rewiring how you think. First practice, the confusion audit. Do this tonight. Pick one thing you understand but can't explain simply. Could be something from school, something from your job, something you've read about and think you know. Anything where if someone asked you to explain it, you'd be able to say words that sound right, but you're not actually sure you could make someone else understand. Got it? Good. Now try to explain it out loud to an empty room. Or record yourself on your phone if that helps. Just talk through it like you're explaining it to someone. And pay attention. Really pay attention to what your brain does. Notice the exact moment you get stuck. The exact moment you start using jargon or big words. The exact moment you wave your hand and say, "basically," or "it's kind of like." The exact moment you realize you don't actually know what comes next. And here's the important part. Don't fix it. Not yet. Just notice it. Write down exactly where you got stuck. What you were trying to explain. What you couldn't find words for. Where the gap was. Because you've now identified where your understanding is fake. That's not a failure. That's a map. That's the most valuable information you could have. Most people never find these gaps because they never test themselves like this. They just keep moving forward, building more fake understanding on top of fake understanding until the whole thing collapses. But now you know. You know exactly where you need to go deeper, and that's how you start building real understanding instead of the performance of understanding. Second practice, the curiosity question swap. For 1 week, replace "what's the answer" with "what's actually happening here?" This is a subtle shift, but it changes everything. Most of the time, when you encounter something you don't understand, your first instinct is to look for the answer. What's the formula? What did the teacher say? What does the textbook tell me to do? You're looking for information to plug into the gap. But try this instead. Before you look anything up, before you ask anyone, spend 60 seconds just looking at the thing. If it's a physics problem, look at the situation. What's moving? What's staying still? What's pushing on what? If it's a math problem, look at the numbers. What are they representing? What happens if I change them? If it's a concept, think about what it would look like in reality. What would I actually see if this was happening? Start from observation, not from trying to remember. And ask yourself, what's actually happening here? Not what should I do, not what's the right answer, but what is this? What am I looking at? And here's what's wild. Sometimes you'll figure it out just by looking. You'll see something you wouldn't have seen if you'd gone straight to the textbook. You'll notice a pattern, make a connection, have an insight that's yours. And even when you don't figure it out, even when you still need to look up the answer, you'll understand it better when you find it. Because you've already engaged with the problem. You've already started building your own model. The answer isn't just information anymore. It's confirmation or correction of something you've already thought about. This retrains your brain to investigate instead of retrieve, to build instead of absorb. And over time, you get better at it. You start seeing more before you need to look anything up. You start trusting your own thinking. And that's when everything changes. Third practice. Break something on purpose. The play principle. Take any concept you're learning right now, anything, and deliberately misapply it. Ask stupid questions. What if gravity worked backwards? What if this equation is lying? What if the opposite was true? What if I multiply instead of divide? What if I use this in a situation where it definitely shouldn't work? And then follow the thought experiment. Don't just ask the question and dismiss it. Actually follow it. What would happen? What would that look like? Where would it break down? Why wouldn't it work? Because play reveals boundaries. When you play with something, when you test it in weird situations, you find out where it works and where it doesn't. And boundaries reveal structure. When you know where something breaks, you understand what it's made of, what assumptions it's built on, what it's actually doing. This isn't wasting time. This is how Newton worked, how Einstein worked, how I worked. We didn't just learn the rules and follow them. We broke the rules to see what would happen. We asked absurd questions. We tested things in impossible situations, not because we were smarter, but because we were more willing to look stupid in private. So go ahead, be stupid on purpose. Ask the dumb questions. Try the thing that obviously won't work. See what happens. You'll learn more from 1 hour of playing like this than from 10 hours of serious study. Fourth practice. Teach back what you learn. After you learn anything, after you read an article, watch a video, finish a chapter, whatever, spend 5 minutes explaining it out loud. Pretend you're talking to a curious kid or someone who knows nothing about the topic. Just talk. Explain what you learned. And notice where you use fancy words. Notice where you say basically or essentially. Notice where you wave your hands and skip over details. Every time you do that, stop. Back up. Try to explain that part more clearly. And if you can't, write it down. That's something you need to go back and actually learn. This sounds simple, but it's transformative. Because it forces you to process what you've learned instead of just storing it. It forces you to convert the information into your own understanding. And that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, between having information and being able to use it. Fifth practice. Protect your not knowing. This is the most important one, and it's the hardest. When someone asks if you understand and you don't, say so. Say, not yet, but I'm working on it. Or I'm still confused about this part, or just, no, I don't. Don't nod along. Don't pretend. Don't fake it. And I know this is hard. I know it feels vulnerable. I know you're afraid of looking stupid, of being judged, of being behind. But here's what happens every time you fake understanding. You train your brain to stop investigating. You close the door on curiosity. You tell yourself the job is done when it's not. And over time, this kills you. It makes you passive, makes you dependent on other people to tell you what to think, makes you afraid of confusion instead of curious about it. And you can't afford that. Not if you want to actually understand things, not if you want to think for yourself. So make I don't understand a statement of power, not shame. Make it the beginning of investigation, not the proof that you're not smart enough. Because every time you admit you're confused, you give yourself permission to learn, and every time you fake understanding, you cement your ignorance. This is the practice that changes everything, because it's not just about learning better, it's about becoming someone who's willing to not know, someone who's comfortable in confusion, someone who sees gaps in their understanding as interesting instead of threatening. And once you become that person, learning becomes natural. You stop forcing it. You stop stressing about it. You just investigate. You just get curious. You just look at things and wonder, and understanding builds itself. Let me bring this back around now. Let me bring us home, because I want to make sure you didn't miss what happened here. You probably clicked on this video hoping I'd give you some secret technique, some productivity hack, some way to think faster or smarter or more like the people you admire, some system, some method, some set of steps that would finally make you feel intelligent. But that's not what happened here. Instead, I asked you to do something harder and more freeing. I asked you to stop trying to be intelligent and start being curious, to stop trying to understand everything and start investigating anything, to stop feeling ashamed of confusion and start treating it like the only honest place to begin. And I know that's not what you expected. I know it's not the neat, packaged answer you were hoping for. But here's the thing. There is no neat, packaged answer. Anyone who tells you there is, anyone who says just follow these 7 steps or use this one weird trick, they're selling you something. They're giving you another system to fail at, another standard to fall short of, another way to feel like you're not enough. But you are enough. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need a higher IQ, a better memory, a more organized mind. You don't need to think like me or Einstein or anyone else. You need to unlearn the idea that thinking is about having answers. You need to remember that thinking is about living comfortably inside questions. That genius is just the willingness to stay there longer. The wobbling plate, the locked box, the kid under the table. Every story I told you is the same story. It's the story of what happens when you give yourself permission to not know, when you create space for actual understanding to grow, instead of filling that space with borrowed answers and fake certainty. And that's not poetic language. That's not metaphor. That's mechanically how the mind works. Your brain can't build understanding while it's pretending to already have it. It can't investigate while it's performing certainty. It can't play while it's trying to be serious. The moment you stop trying to look smart is the moment you can start actually becoming smart. So here's what I want you to remember. I want you to write this down. I want you to put it somewhere you'll see it. I want you to come back to it when you feel stupid, when you feel lost, when you feel like everyone else got something you didn't. You are not too slow. You are not too confused. You are not missing some magic ability other people have. You have simply been lied to about what thinking is. Thinking is not retrieval. It's construction. It's not about being right. It's about being honest. It's not about knowing. It's about noticing. And you already know how to do all of that. You did it when you were 4 years old, before anyone taught you to be ashamed of questions, before anyone told you that confusion meant failure, before anyone made you believe that intelligence was about having answers instead of asking better questions. That kid is still in there, that curious, fearless, shameless investigator who wanted to know how everything worked and didn't care about looking stupid while finding out. And everything I've told you today is just about getting back to that, about removing the layers of shame and performance and fake understanding that have been piled on top of your natural curiosity. You don't need to learn how to think. You need to unlearn how to pretend you already do. And if this landed for you, if something shifted even slightly, I want to know. I want you to tell me in the comments. Tell me one thing you're going to stop faking understanding about. Tell me one question you've been afraid to ask. Tell me what you're confused about right now and why that's actually a good thing. I won't answer it for you. I can't. Because the answer you build yourself will be better than any answer I could give you. But I'll remind you that asking it makes you braver than most people ever get. That admitting confusion makes you more honest than most people are willing to be. That staying in the question makes you smarter than people who settle for borrowed answers. And if you want more of this, more truth about how minds actually work, not how they're supposed to work, subscribe. Not because I have all the answers, I don't, I never did. But because I'm still asking the questions. Because I'm still confused about things and still curious about them. Because I still think the most important thing you can say is, I don't know, let me look. And maybe, if enough of us start saying that, if enough of us start protecting our confusion instead of hiding it, start investigating instead of pretending, start playing instead of performing, maybe we can build something better than this broken system we've inherited. This system that teaches people to be ashamed of the very thing that makes them human. The ability to wonder. The ability to not know and be okay with it. The ability to look at something and just investigate. You've got this. Not because you're smart, not because you're talented, not because you're special, because you're curious. And you're willing to admit when you're not. And that's better than all the intelligence in the world. That's the real secret. That's the thing that changed physics. That's the thing that changed my life. And that's the thing that can change yours. You don't need to force your mind to think like a genius. You need to give it permission to think like you. Messy and confused and curious and real. That's where everything begins. That's where everything has always begun. And that's where you are right now. So start there.